The impeachment of the South Korean president failed. The name of Hong Kong's new pandas will remain the same. And test game for Kai Tak's new indoor facility. Good evening. After most lawmakers from the ruling party walked out of the impeachment ballot, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol survived the vote and remains in power for now. David Garrett reports.
Two-thirds of the 300-strong parliament, so 200, were needed to pass the bill of impeachment of Yoon Suk-yeol. Opposition parties have 192 between them, but needed 8 to back them from the ruling People Power Party. Most members of the PPP left the chamber not backing the impeachment. The Speaker said they were disregarding the will of the people. They continued to stream out. Some said they feared a presidential election that would see opposition parties take power. Initially, only one PPP stayed, Ahn Chol-soo, then another joined him. But 2 is not 8. The vote started with too few MPs in the chamber to achieve the two-thirds majority. The National Assembly waited to see if some from PPP would return, as the crowds outside chanted, "Go back and vote." 2 politicians came back to vote, to applause and cheers inside and outside the building. However, Kim Suk-wook later said he voted against impeaching the president. In an earlier broadcast to the nation, Yoon did not resign as some anticipated. He said, "Driven by desperation as president, I imposed martial law." Yoon told South Koreans he was truly sorry and said he would not impose martial law again. He lowered his head at the end of his speech. As protests continue, he may be forced to bow to public pressure. People power on the streets across the country could yet force Yoon out. David Garrett, TVB News.
The 2 giant pandas gifted to Hong Kong by the central government will retain their names as annulled and Keke. The government held a naming competition in October to gather name suggestions for the animals. Over 1,000 submissions were in favour of their original names. The national treasures will greet the public on Sunday. Rosanai reports.
兩隻大熊貓將會繼續係叫安安同埋可可嘅。
In a greeting ceremony at Ocean Park, the names for the 2 giant pandas were announced, Annan and Keke. In Chinese pronunciation, An and Ke have the meaning of peace and stability. Ocean Park said more than 22,000 name suggestions were submitted for the competition, with over 1,000 saying the animals' names should be kept as they are. Meanwhile, members of the public will be able to visit the national treasures for the first time on Sunday.
We've been preparing for quite a few weeks for the crowd to come to Ocean Park to visit Annan and Keke. So we're planning to have time cards. If the crowd is really significant, we'll do our best job to do everything in an orderly manner.
Chief Executive John Lee and his wife visited Hong Kong Jockey Club Sichuan Treasures in Ocean Park, where Annan and Keke live. Annan was busy enjoying his food, while Keke was more active. The new Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism, Rosanna Law, was among the officials who used a phone to capture the moment. The chief executive said the arrival of the giant pandas shows the support and care of the central government to the SAR. He said authorities will continue to explore and promote opportunities brought by the pandas. Mumusnai, TVB News.
The public can catch a glimpse of 2,500 panda sculptures in Tsim Sha Tsui this weekend. It is the first stop of a tour exhibition which will last until the end of December. The 2,500 pandas in 8 designs will appear at multiple landmarks in the city, including its first stop, the Star Avenue in Tsim Sha Tsui. The pandas will be moved to Ong Ping on Lantau Island next weekend. The Kai Tak Sports Park will be open next year. Its indoor sports centre, Kai Tak Arena, has hosted its first test event. Some 2,000 spectators entered the venue for basketball games this afternoon, with indoor security checks being tested for the first time. Samantha Lee was there.
There are 3 major venues in the Kai Tak Sports Park. Today is Kai Tak Arena's turn to conduct a drill. The arena is opposite to the Kai Tak Youth Sports Ground. Is it difficult to get here?
There are so many different stadiums here, actually. We first time to come here. So the police and also the security guy help us quite a lot. We follow all the guidance and also the instructions to reach here.
We took the MTR to come here. It's quite convenient, just walking straight, so it's easy for us to come.
Under today's arrangement, there is no public parking area available at the sports park. Spectators are encouraged to take public transport, such as the MTR, to get here. There were 8 security check counters inside the arena. Items such as long umbrellas and empty bottles were not allowed. Spectators not carrying a bag can get in through a dedicated corridor. The test event today involved 2 basketball matches. The new Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism, Rosanna Law, came to watch the second match. While the arena's grand hall can accommodate up to 10,000, only about 2,000 people were invited. The venue is designated to host major international tournaments, including badminton, basketball, gymnastics, tennis, and table tennis. Up to 80% of the seats are retractable or removable to enable flexibility for the venue.
震撼咯，因為修頓其實雖然話都唔係話細，但係
This student said it is impressive and much bigger than the Southern Stadium in Wan Chai. Food and drinks were sold in the arena, with some Taiwanese drinks, though prices are on the expensive side. On Sunday, stress tests will be conducted at both the Kai Tak Arena and the Youth Sports Ground, with 12,000 participants expected to take part. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
Secretary for Housing Winnie Ho today said details of the government's policy for subdivided flats could be revised, so there is no need for landlords to rush to modify the units. This came after the government received 2 complaints about landlords forcing subdivided flat tenants to move out. Osanai reports.
In the policy address, the government says substandard subdivided flats must be modified to become basic housing units that fulfill required standards. Landlords will be punished if they fail to do so. A consultation period for the policy will last between this month and February. However, the Rating and Valuation Department said they had received 2 complaints from subdivided unit tenants about being forced to move out by landlords. Speaking on a radio program on Saturday, Housing Secretary Winnie Ho reminded landlords the requirements for basic housing units are being discussed, which means the policy could turn out differently after the consultation period. The government initially said the basic housing units must have at least 1 openable window. However, Ho said they ultimately may allow the units to have patio windows as well. Ho also commented on Rosanna Law, who worked under her as Director of Housing. Law has now been promoted to Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism. Ho said Law's work attitude is enthusiastic. The housing chief added the reshuffle will not affect the Bureau's work. On Saturday afternoon, Ho was joined by Deputy Financial Secretary Michael Wong and other officials in attending the opening ceremony for a program that helped tenants of subdivided flats to transfer to light public housing and transitional housing. The program also assists the tenants in obtaining furniture. Mums 9, TVB News.
Overseas, and an explosion rocked a neighbourhood in the Dutch capital early today, destroying several apartments and injuring multiple people. The cause of the disaster in The Hague is unclear. Emergency authorities said 4 people have been rescued from the rubble and taken to hospital. However, they could not say how many people may still be under the rubble. A line of ambulances could be seen waiting nearby in anticipation of more victims. A spokesperson for a local hospital said they're on standby to deal with injuries. Residents of the northeastern neighbourhood of Mariahova in The Hague heard a huge bang and screams before dawn. One woman told local media that she thought an earthquake had happened. Dutch authorities have deployed a specialized urban search and rescue team to the scene, with 4 dogs trained to find victims. The team was previously used during the devastating earthquake in Turkey in 2023. Syrian rebels are poised to press their lightning advance after reaching the edge of the central city of Homs. Seizing Homs, a key crossroads between the capital and the Mediterranean Sea, would cut off Damascus from the coastal stronghold of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's minority Alawite sect, and from a naval base and airbase of his Russian allies there. Rebels outside Homs came under intense bombardment overnight. The military and its allies were attempting to dig in for defense of the city. A coalition of rebel factions that include the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has made a last call on forces loyal to Assad's government in Homs to defect. Ahead of the rebel advance, thousands of people fled Homs towards the coastal regions of Latakia and Tartus. Since the rebel sweep into Aleppo a week ago, government defences have crumbled across the country. And still ahead. Turmoil continues in Georgia over its relationship with the EU. Notre Dame in Paris will reopen today. And TikTok loses court case in the US. Welcome back. In Georgia, the police used force to push back protesters in the streets of the capital Tbilisi early today. This as demonstrations continued following a government decision to suspend Georgia's EU accession talks. Police fired tear gas and used water cannons in a bid to calm protests in central Tbilisi early on Saturday. The demonstrators were seen aiming fireworks at the officers and shining lasers at police during the demonstration in the capital's central streets. Some draped with Georgian and European Union flags blew whistles and lit up their phones outside the country's parliament. The protesters said they'll do everything within their power to get rid of what they called an illegitimate government. The protests remain in full swing after the ruling Georgian regime retained control of parliament in the disputed October 26th election, a vote widely seen as a referendum on Georgia's EU aspirations. The opposition and pro-Western President Salome Zurabishvili have accused the governing party of rigging the vote with neighbouring Russia's help. Hundreds of journalists and protesters reported violations of their rights during the protests. More than 300 protesters have been detained and over 100 people have been treated for injuries. The Georgian Special Investigation Service, a government agency that investigates alleged abuse of power, said it was investigating violence against protesters and interference with the journalists' work. However, human rights lawyers have argued such investigations in the past never led to real results. President Zurabishvili refused to recognise the official election results and contested them before the Constitutional Court, which rejected her appeal. Subdivided, who plays a largely ceremonial role, has urged the country's Western partners to respond to police brutality against protesters and raids of opposition groups by putting strong pressure on what she called a ruling party that is driving the country over the cliff. France, Germany and Poland have outlined plans to raise the topic of Georgia at the next European Union Foreign Affairs meeting, with a view to taking possible measures against the country's government. Romania's Constitutional Court annulled the first-round results of the presidential election. The entire electoral process will have to restart. The ruling came less than 2 days before the second round. It was due to feature independent candidate Călin Georgescu and USR candidate Elena Lasconi. Right-winger Georgescu was the shock winner of the first round. Both Georgescu and Lasconi condemned the ruling, with the frontrunner saying democracy had been trampled. The court came its decision after seeing intelligence documents which say Georgescu benefited from Russian influence on social media during a period which was illegal under Romanian election law. A new election date will be set, with the entire process starting from scratch. France's iconic Notre Dame Cathedral will be reopening its doors later today for the first time since a devastating fire nearly destroyed the 861-year-old landmark in 2019. A security forces operation began early on Saturday around the Notre Dame Cathedral ahead of the reopening. Security will be tight all through the weekend, echoing measures taken during the Paris Olympics earlier this year. The Ile de la Cité, the island at the River Seine that is home to Notre Dame, will be closed to tourists and non-residents, with access restricted to invitees and those who live on the island. The restoration has been heralded as a spectacular achievement. It took just 5 years to restore the structure. It took nearly 2 centuries to build. US President-elect Donald Trump and Britain's Prince William will attend the reopening celebrations under Notre Dame's soaring Gothic arches, led by Archbishop Laurent Ulrich. The popular video platform TikTok faced a major setback at a US Court of Appeals upheld a law that would ban the app in America. TikTok spokesman expressed disappointment with the move, saying the ban would silence the voices of millions of American users. The company has urged the US Supreme Court to overrule the divestment mandate before it takes effect. Danny Zhou reports.
On Friday, the U.S. Court for Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit ruled the law that would force the sale or ban of TikTok survives constitutional scrutiny. TikTok has claimed the crackdown infringes on the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And nevertheless, citing national security concerns over its ownership by a Chinese company, the court said in its ruling the U.S. government's action to protect free speech and to limit a foreign adversary nation's ability to gather data on its people are consistent with the First Amendment. Under the law, TikTok has until January the 19th to be sold off by its parent company ByteDance or face a nationwide ban in the US. If ByteDance does not divest by this deadline, TikTok will be dropped from the US app stores. A TikTok spokesman noted the ban has been conceived and pushed through based on inaccurate, flawed and hypothetical information. The banning bill was signed into law in April by US President Joe Biden. TikTok and ByteDance, along with some of the app's content creators, challenged it as unconstitutional and sued in a bid to block the law. Meanwhile, Republican President-elect Donald Trump vowed in one of his first campaign videos on TikTok that he would save the app, even though he initially sought to ban it during his first term in the White House. As the looming deadline for TikTok is drawing close, the law allows a 90-day extension only if ByteDance has a legitimate sales negotiation in progress to sell TikTok. TikTok said it would appeal the decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
The White House staunchly defended US President Joe Biden's decision to pardon his son Hunter earlier this week. She also expressed concerns that the US's incoming Republican administration could be looking for retribution against that of Biden.
And the fact is, when you think about how the president got to this decision, circumstances have changed. They have. And a couple of things, and I said this on Monday as well. Republicans said they weren't going to let up, weren't going to stop. Recently announced Trump appointees for law enforcement have said on the campaign that they were out for retribution, and I think we should believe their words, right? We should believe what they said.
Jean-Pierre added the White House also wouldn't rule out broad preemptive pardons to protect aides and allies from potential retribution by US President-elect Donald Trump. Pardons are historically afforded to those accused of specific crimes, and usually to those who have already been convicted of an offense. Biden's team is considering issuing them for some who have not even been investigated, let alone charged. The president could, if he chose, issue blanket pardons to specific people whom Trump and his allies have threatened to punish. The sixth-term Macau SAR government will be inaugurated on December 20th. The outgoing Secretary for Economy and Finance, Lei Wai-nong, said he felt honored to have participated in the work of the Guangdong-Macau In-Depth Cooperation Zone in Hengqin. Danny Zhou reports.
Macau's gross domestic product in the first 3 quarters of this year is about 301 billion Macau patakas. This, as the city's annual figure for 2024 was estimated at over 300 million by mid-November, an increase of 6% compared to last year. The daily influx of tourists reached 95,000, nearly 90% of pre-pandemic levels. Secretary for Economy and Finance Lei Wai-nong, who led Macau out of the pandemic, said authorities will enhance promotional activities to tourists from faraway regions such as Europe and America, while forging closer ties with the Greater Bay Area. Lei will be replaced by Tai Kin-yip, who is currently serving as Director of the Economic and Technological Development Bureau. Lei addressed one of his major challenges during his tenure, the development of Hengqin. The number of Macau staff in Hengqin will soon reach 128, and all of them are working with high morale. The government will continue to bolster tourism and share the economic gains with Macau residents, Lei said, adding that he expects to see more emerging industries to bring fresh job opportunities. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Back locally, and a group organised an art learning festival, allowing students to gain Chinese calligraphy skills. Hong Kong Youth Cultural and Arts Competitions Committee have been holding calligraphy competitions for many years to promote Chinese culture. This time, 75 primary students learned the art. Some of them felt proud to be practicing this Chinese tradition. Some said Chinese calligraphy helped develop patience. A calligrapher said schools are important supporters to help preserve and promote this craftsmanship. And a reminder that Sunday's Pearl May News will be broadcast at 8 p.m. because of special programme arrangements. Join us then. And that's news. Thanks for watching.